Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker. Today, we have episode 447 for September 22nd, 2025. Got a big news show for you today. Lots to cover. Don't want to dally too much, but I do have a few quick notes before we get started. So first of all, as of early Saturday, there appears to be some sort of an airport cyber attack on the check-in and boarding systems that's causing a lot of major delays in places like London, Brussels, and Berlin, causing the airlines to do things manually, whatever that means today. I can't imagine anything in an airport operating that way today, but they must have some sort of backup, but it's apparently very slow. So that's about all we know at this point. But I would like to quickly say that it's affecting a third-party system used by multiple airlines, and we have got to get a handle on these dependencies, folks. We don't understand what most of them even are. Things like software bill of materials and hardware bill of materials would help, but we also need to map out our system and vendor dependencies because I guarantee the bad guys are doing this, and it's going to be these weird third-party things that nobody thinks about that brings everything down to its knees because we all depend on it, and when it doesn't work, all of a sudden, chaos ensues. And we've got to figure these things out and make ourselves more resilient against stuff like this. Also on LinkedIn is changing their terms of service. If you use LinkedIn, they, like everybody else, are changing their terms of service so that they can train their AI models on your data. And we don't want that ever. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a privacy guides discussion on this, which contains links directly to the two LinkedIn settings that you want to make sure you change. Make sure you turn them off. And, while you're there, if you have not been to Privacy Guides, check out the main site. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. They do some really amazing stuff. If you ever want a really rigorously vetted opinion on privacy tools and things that are better than Google and all these other things that most of us use, they've got it. And they do a really great job, and they keep it up to date, and they do just amazing work. And this year, they've really kicked it up. They've been writing a lot more articles. They've been doing videos. So anyway, check them out and bookmark them, follow them on socials. And if you like what you see, there's a little red heart at the upper right of that website where you can donate. It's great to support efforts like this, and they're doing some good work. Okay, one more note, and then we'll start talking about the news. I have gotten over the last, 2 or 3 years, a handful of reports from people, all of whom use the AntennaPod podcast app, who say that all of a sudden it just stops working. And in every single one of those cases, I believe, the culprit has been they were using a VPN. And somewhere in the podcast hosting framework that I use, one of the services was blocking that IP address. My guess is maybe some bad guys were using this VPN for nefarious stuff, and maybe some automated threat intelligence stuff was blocking that certain IP. And so if they turned off the VPN, or if they just tried a different VPN server, that usually fixes it. So just FYI, if you've ever had that kind of trouble, that is a potential solution. If that doesn't fix it, as these other people have done, feel free to reach out to me and we'll see if we can figure it out. Okay, so news. We've got several things to talk about today. Chat control in the EU is on the precipice. Looks like it's going to fail, but we don't know yet. And of course, we want it to fail. Samsung has confirmed that its very expensive smart refrigerators with screens on the front are going to start showing you ads. There's a new automated sextortion spyware scam that sounds like one of the ones we used to see in emails, but this one actually may have compromising pictures of you visiting porn sites. A new study revealed that about a third of UK firms are using bossware to monitor their workers' activities. Airlines are selling 5 billion plane ticket records to the government for warrantless searching. ICE has signed a new $3 million contract with a phone hacking company. ChatGPT has decided to age-gate some of its features and will do so by trying to guess your age, or may require you to upload an ID. The Swiss government is looking to undercut privacy tech, and it's really a weird thing for them to be doing, but it's causing a lot of consternation from companies that have located in that country because they used to have great privacy laws. The Google Pixel 10 has added support for what we call C2PA, which is a way to verify the provenance of some types of media, which we mentioned briefly in my interview with Carissa Veliz last week. And finally, in some good news, the iPhone 17, the chip in the new phone has some really amazing anti-spyware features that I wanted to call out. And then we'll get to my tip of the week, which is part 3 of my overall series and part 2 of my list of ideas for ways for finding all of your old online accounts. So we got a lot to talk about today. Let's get to it. All right, first up, this is from Tech Radar, and it's about chat control, which is something that the EU has been pushing, which would pretty much break all encryption. It's in the name of curbing CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. But at the end of the day, it's going to undermine privacy for everybody, and it's a really, really bad idea. And they're coming very close to a vote on this, and it's not clear at this point whether it's going to succeed or fail. So anyway, let me read you this update. After over 3 years in the making, the fate of encrypted chats in Europe is anything but settled. On September 12, 2025, EU members had to share their final position on the latest iteration of the Child Sexual Abuse Regulation, or CSAR, proposal. Yet again, the bill failed to attract the needed support. The Danish version of what critics have deemed chat control would require all messaging service providers operating in Europe to scan users' chats, even if they're encrypted, in a bid to detect and halt the spread of child sexual abuse material. These new obligations and the risks they can lead to for people's privacy and security not only have attracted strong criticism from digital rights experts and technologists, but they also keep dividing the political ranks. However, despite the proposal not receiving full support, the Denmark proposal is still moving forward. Another meeting is set for October 14th with the Justice and Home Affairs Council. If successful, the CSAR bill will finally land in the European Parliament to be discussed as part of the trialogue negotiations alongside the EU Council and Commission. This brings us to the question, will the Parliament save our encrypted chats? The good news is that the EU Parliament is against mass scanning, on paper at least. In November of 2023, the vast majority of MEPs from both sides of the political spectrum already agreed on safeguards to ensure that mass scanning and general monitoring do not occur. Then, in February 2024, the European Court of Human Rights made it illegal to break encryption. That's the technical infrastructure that the likes of Signal, WhatsApp, ProtonMail, and the best VPN services use to scramble our online communications to prevent unauthorized access. These actions combined then pushed the EU to adopt a 2-year extension of the interim regulation on voluntary chat scanning, waiting for the EU Council to strike the right compromise on chat control. Fast forward to July 2025, and the Danish version came as the latest attempt to find an agreement. Crucially, the mandatory scanning is expected to occur directly on the device before messages are encrypted, targeting shared URLs, pictures, and videos. Only governments and military accounts are excluded from the scope of the bill, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Experts, however, still believe such a client-side scanning system seriously endangers encryption protections, a risk that pushed over 500 cryptography scientists to sign a letter to warn against agreeing to the proposal in its current form. Hence, as the chat control has never been closer to becoming law, the EU Parliament's role is set to be crucial. There's just one problem now. Following last year's European elections, the formation of the EU Parliament has been completely reshuffled, and that's something that makes digital rights groups like the Internet Society worried. As per the latest data, 14 EU members support the proposal, including crucial countries like France, Italy, and Spain. 9 are against, and 4 are still undecided. Most notably, while Germany joined the opposition on the eve of the crucial September 12th meeting, the country has now reverted to the undecided list. Germany is thought to be the deciding factor, making chat control's critics worried. The previous government was indeed very pro-encryption, seeking to make encryption a legal right at home while strongly opposing mandatory scanning in the bloc. Yet, the new administration has been giving very mixed messages. And this is a quote from Callum Vogie, from the Internet Society, and Callum says, "The only risk here is for the negotiations to be political rather than technical. If that occurs, there's a risk of countries changing their position in exchange for support on some other file. That's why public pressure on this will be so vital, especially with the EU Parliament remaining our best chance," unquote. Vogie is nonetheless pretty positive about the opposition holding throughout the October meeting, with the Danes failing to get their proposal through. That said, he recognizes the pressure on the Council to find an agreement as concerning. Okay, so this is a really big deal, and if you are in the EU, you should absolutely make your voice heard on this. Go to fightchatcontrol.eu. There's a link in the show notes. From there, you can follow this issue closely and learn how you can help. Oh, and I did say I was going to come back to the fact that I thought it was interesting that the government, the people passing this, are saying, yeah, okay, security for me, but not for thee, which is so common in these scenarios. The people in the government, their communications are way too important to be affected by this. And, government and military officials, they never do anything wrong. The fact that they have a carve out for that should mean that they understand the real implications of this. And anyway, if you are in the EU, definitely check out that site and contact your MEPs. All right, next up, this is just absolutely infuriating. It's from the Android Authority of all sites, though maybe Samsung refrigerators use the Android operating system. I don't know. Anyway, let me just read this. Oh, this is horrible. Samsung started to roll out an update to its refrigerators that brought ads to the display, whether you like it or not. The whole situation is rather surreal, but not entirely unsurprising. There are some doubts that the changelog wasn't real or that it belonged to a different product. Now, Samsung has confirmed to us that ads are indeed coming to its refrigerators. We had reached out to Samsung for a statement, and this is what a Samsung spokesperson told us. So I'm quoting here. Samsung is committed to innovation and enhancing everyday value of our home appliance customers. As part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen that value, we are conducting a pilot program to offer promotions and curated advertisements on certain Samsung Family Hub refrigerator models in the U.S. market. As part of this pilot program, Family Hub refrigerators in the U.S. will receive an over-the-network software update with terms and conditions and privacy notice. Advertising will appear on certain Family Hub refrigerator cover screens. And cover screen is capitalized there. Cover screen must be the name for their screensaver on their fridge, basically. And it says the cover screen appears when a Family Hub screen is idle. Ad design format may change depending on Family Hub personalization options for the cover screen, and advertising will not appear when cover screen displays art mode or picture albums. Advertisements can be dismissed on the cover screens where ads are shown, meaning that specific ads will not appear again during the campaign period. All right, that's the end of the quote. And there's so many ways you could interpret that would give you leeway. Like campaign period, like how long does that last? That doesn't mean forever. But anyway, let me read a couple more things from the article. And by the way, they're going to talk about the changelog here, which is usually like release notes, but this must be public software somewhere because from what these guys are saying, it looks like they've actually looked into the code changes that are coming. So keep that in mind as I read these last couple bits. From the changelog, we know that ads will be displayed on the cover screen for the weather, color, and daily board themes, whereas the cover screen for the art and gallery themes will not display advertisements in line with the company's statement. It's still unclear which exact refrigerators are getting the ad infestation, but Samsung's current Family Hub equipped lineup in the US starts at $1,800 and goes all the way to $3,500. It doesn't seem like users can entirely turn off ads, which is a shame. I'd say it's more than a shame. Disconnecting the fridge from the internet might stop the ads, but you will also inevitably lose out on several smart features you paid for. If you have a Samsung refrigerator with a door display, let us know in the comments how your experience has been with them and how you feel about ads coming to them. Okay, so this is, as I often say, severely disappointing, but not at all surprising. I mean, it was just a matter of time. If you've got a smart device that has a display on it, you're going to start seeing ads. I mean, they just can't help themselves, these companies. It's also just wrong. You bought and paid for this thing. Yes, you hooked it up to the internet, but these ads weren't there when you bought it. Adding them later is just wrong. I'm sure that's part of why the terms and conditions are changing, because it's probably like if you continue to use the $1,800 fridge that you bought, then you are thereby agreeing to us showing you ads. It's just wrong on so many levels. And, again, note this was done entirely remotely through a software update. And it wasn't just the software they were updating. They also updated their terms of service. Oh, it just kills me. And this is just going to keep happening. These companies can't help themselves. They're going to keep monetizing us. And it's just awful. We live in the worst timeline. Now, you might be able to block just the ads and retain the internet functionality by using something like NextDNS on your home router, which is something I do. if you were to run this next DNS service on your home router and all your devices in your home were using that for their DNS, then a lot of these known ad sites would be blocked. And that does go a long way to blocking ads on some of these IoT devices that otherwise you'd have no way to kind of control their internet traffic. But I'll tell you what, the next place I expect to see this is cars. I'm surprised, honestly, we have not seen this yet. They're all internet connected now. They've got a nice big color screen in the middle of the car. I am just shocked that we have not started seeing ads playing on cars. Now, I told you almost a year ago, exactly, I looked it up, about a Ford patent that talked about listening to what you say in the car, because your car does have microphones in it, and showing you ads based on your interests. And my guess is probably your location would factor into that as well. But can you imagine you're driving along in the car, you're talking to someone, oh yeah, I'm getting kind of hungry. And then all of a sudden an advertisement for a nearby Wendy's or whatever pops up. Oh my God. Anyway, to my knowledge, this hasn't started happening yet, but it's going to happen. Someone's going to do it. There will be outrage. But, just like with the refrigerator thing, outrage might not be enough to stop it. All right, next up, this is from Wired, and it's about a new sextortion scam. Sextortion-based hacking, which hijacks a victim's webcam or blackmails them with nudes they're tricked or coerced into sharing, has long represented one of the most disturbing forms of cybercrime. Now, one specimen of widely available spyware has turned that relatively manual crime into an automated feature, detecting when the user is browsing pornography on their PC, screenshotting it, and taking a candid photo of the victim through their webcam. On Wednesday, researchers at security firm Proofpoint published their analysis of an open-source variant of InfoStealer malware known as Stellarium. That's Stealer, like steal something. That's hard to say. Stellarium. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with that. That the company has seen used in multiple cyber criminal campaigns since May of this year. The malware, like all info stealers, is designed to infect a target's computer and automatically send a hacker a wide variety of stolen sensitive data, including banking information, usernames and passwords, and keys to victims' crypto wallets. Stellarium, however, adds another more humiliating form of espionage. It also monitors the victim's browser for web addresses that include certain not safe for work keywords, screenshots browser tabs that include those words, photographs the victim via their webcam while they're watching those porn pages, and sends all the images to a hacker who can then blackmail the victim with the threat of releasing them. And this is a quote from Selena Larson, one of the Proofpoint researchers. And Selena says, quote, "When it comes to info stealers, they typically are looking for whatever they can grab. This adds another layer of privacy invasion and sensitive information that you definitely wouldn't want in the hands of a particular hacker. It's gross. I hate it." Unquote. In the hacking campaigns Proofpoint analyzed, cybercriminals attempted to trick users into downloading and installing Stellarium as an attachment or a web link, luring victims with typical bait like fake payment or invoice. The emails targeted victims inside companies in the hospitality industry, as well as in education and finance, though Proofpoint notes that users outside of the companies were also likely targeted, but wouldn't be seen by its monitoring tools. Once it's installed, Stellarium is designed to steal a wide variety of data and send it to the hacker via services like Telecom, Discord, or the SMTP protocol, mail, in some variants of the spyware, all of which is relatively standard in info stealers. The researchers were more surprised to see the automated sextortion feature, which monitors browser URLs for a list of pornography-related terms, such as sex and porn, which can be customized by the hacker and trigger simultaneous image captures from the user's webcam and browser. Proofpoint notes that it hasn't identified any specific victims of that sextortion function, but suggests that the existence of the feature means it has likely been used. More hands-on sextortion methods are a common blackmail tactic among cybercriminals, and scam campaigns in which hackers claim to have obtained webcam pics of victims looking at pornography have also plagued inboxes in recent years, including some that even try to bolster their credibility with pictures of their victim's home pulled from Google Maps. But actual automated webcam pics of users browsing porn is pretty much unheard of, says Proofpoint researcher Kyle Cucci. So it goes on a little bit. But I wanted to discuss this because I've talked many times on this show about the fake sextortion scam that is usually done by email, where it says, hey, I caught you looking at something that you probably wouldn't other people know you were looking at. And oh, by the way, I took pictures of all of that, including, using your webcam while you were watching it. And, it would make some weird comment like, and you were doing some really interesting stuff, or you're into some really interesting stuff, or whatever. And then it would make some claims like, look, hey, I just happened to catch this on your thing. I didn't really mean to do that. Tell you what, give me $300 or $1,000 or, some ransom. And I promise I'll delete this and I'll just go away. Now, the addition of the picture from Google Maps was interesting. And this would be the Google drive-by view where it's, you can get into Google Maps and say, show me what it actually looks like if I'm standing right here. And that's all they're doing. And they may have been able to figure out your home address from your IP address. It's unclear, but if they really had pictures of you doing this, they would probably send you an image of you doing it, and that would be a lot more compelling. All the email scams that I talked about in the past, those were fake. If you ever see those, you can just delete them and not worry about it. But this one actually does what that email scam claimed it was doing. So I thought it would be good to talk about because, normally when I talk about this, I tell people not to worry about it. In this case, if this actually happened, my guess is the hacker would probably give you pictures of what they found, and then you would know it was for real. So as always, what you really want to do here is not get infected with malware in the first place. So be really careful about what links you click on and what files you open if it was something that was sent to you when you weren't expecting it. All right, next up, this is from The Guardian, and it's a new study that says a third of UK firms are using what's called bossware to monitor their workers' activity. So according to the article, a third of UK employers are using bossware technology to track workers' activity, with the most common methods including monitoring emails and web browsing. Private companies are most likely to deploy in-work surveillance, and 1 in 7 employers are recording or reviewing screen activity, according to a UK-wide survey that estimates the extent of office snooping. The findings, shared with The Guardian by the Chartered Management Institute, or CMI, are based on responses from hundreds of UK managers and suggest there has been a recent growth in computerized work surveillance. In 2023, less than a fifth of people thought they were being monitored by an employer, the Information Commissioner's Office found. The finding that about a third of managers report their organizations are monitoring workers' online activities on employer-owned devices is probably an underestimate, as roughly the same proportion said they don't know what tracking their organizations do. Many monitoring systems are aimed at preventing insider threats and safeguarding sensitive information, as well as detecting productivity dips. But the trend appears to be causing unease. A large minority of managers are opposed to the practice, saying it undermines trust with staff and invades their personal privacy, the CMI found. One manager at an insurance company, which is developing AI systems to monitor staff screen activity to track performance, said it was unsettling. One provider of employee monitoring offers to report on workers' idle time, employee productivity tracking, and use of unapproved AI or social media, as well as real-time insights into employee behavior, including screenshots, screen recordings, keystrokes, and app usage. In response to the findings, the ICO said bosses, quote, must make their employees aware of the nature, extent, and reasons for monitoring, unquote, and said excessive monitoring can, quote, undermine people's privacy, especially if they are working from home, unquote. It warned it will take action if necessary. Among managers who knew their organizations carried out surveillance, 35% were monitoring emails. Overall, tracking login and log-off times and system access were the most popular form of surveillance. The study found that 53% of managers supported monitoring of employees' online activities on employer-owned devices, but 42% opposed it, mostly because it undermines trust, but also because they believe it does not improve performance and can be misused or lead to unfair judgments or disciplinary actions. Okay, I thought it was interesting just to actually have a study on this, but it's kind of self-reported, and it sounds like they were asking the wrong people. Like, if these managers don't know that this is happening, then they're asking the wrong people. So the incidence of this actually could be much higher. But let's face it, companies probably have all the legal rights necessary to surveil their employees on company property and whenever they are using company equipment. And they may not be required to tell you. Look, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure your rights probably vary wildly from country to country and even state to state. But you should always assume that anything you do on company equipment or on company property can be legally monitored and recorded for future review. I'm not even talking like live right now. It could be recorded and looked at later. If you use your phone for work, your employer may require you to install what's called an MDM profile or multi-device management profile on your phone. And this will allow them to control some of the security settings, like you're requiring a lock pin or maybe even a longer or an alphanumeric pin to protect access to company apps and data. I mean, if you're using your phone for work and you're putting company data on your phone, or you have apps on your phone that can access company data, then they're going to want some say in the security on your phone. And this profile could probably also see the other apps you have on your phone, and they may prevent some apps from being installed on your phone. However, the way they're supposed to work, these profiles, is it shouldn't allow access to your personal data from non-company apps or personal emails and photos. That's the way it's supposed to work. But at the end of the day, when you're an employee, you're giving up your privacy rights in a lot of cases. And I think we need regulations that give you some rights in this regard. And they certainly need to be transparent about it. But that's where we are right now, so just wanted to give you a heads up. All right, next, this is, I think, one of two stories today from 404 Media, and it's about the airlines, or maybe not the airlines directly, but services they work with, selling 5 billion plane ticket records to the U.S. government for warrantless searching. A data broker owned by the country's major airlines, including American Airlines, United, and Delta, is selling access to 5 billion plane ticketing records to the government for warrantless searching and monitoring of people's movements, including by the FBI, Secret Service, ICE, and many other agencies, according to a new contract and other records reviewed by 404 Media. The contract provides new insight into the scale of the sale of passengers' data by the Airlines Reporting Corporation, or ARC, the airlines-owned data broker. The contract shows ARC's data includes information related to more than 270 carriers and is sourced through more than 12,800 travel agencies. ARC has previously told the government not to reveal to the public where this passenger data came from, which includes people's names, full flight itineraries, and financial details. ARC is owned and operated by at least 8 major U.S. airlines, publicly released documents show. Its board of directors includes representatives from American Airlines, Delta, United, Southwest, Alaska Airlines, JetBlue, and European Airlines Air France and Lufthansa, and Canada's Air Canada. ARC acts as a bridge between airlines and travel agencies, in which it helps with fraud prevention and finds trends in travel data. ARC also sells passenger data to the government as part of what it calls the Travel Intelligence Program, or TIP. TIP is updated every day with the previous day's ticket sales and can show a person's paid intent to travel. Government agencies can then search this data by name, credit card, airline, and more. The new contract shows that ARC has access to much more data than previously reported. Earlier coverage found TIP contained more than 1 billion records spanning more than 3 years of past and future travel. The new contract says ARC provides the government with, quote, 5 billion ticketing records for searching capabilities, unquote. 404 Media obtained the contract through a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, with the Secret Service. The contract indicates the Secret Service plans to pay ARC $885,000 for access to the data stretching into 2028. A spokesperson for the agency told 404 Media, quote, "The U.S. Secret Service is committed to protecting our nation's leaders and financial infrastructure in close coordination with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. To safeguard the integrity of our work, we do not discuss the tools used to conduct our operations," unquote. The Secret Service did not answer a question on whether it seeks a warrant, subpoena, or court order to search ARC data. 404 Media has filed FOIA requests with a wide range of agencies that public procurement records show have purchased ARC data. That includes ICE, CBP, ATF, the SEC, TSA, the State Department, U.S. Marshals, and the IRS. The court record reviewed by 404 Media shows the FBI has asked ARC to search its databases for a specific person as part of a drug investigation. An ARC spokesman told 404 Media in an email that TIP, quote, "was established by ARC after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks and has been since used by the U.S. intelligence and law enforcement community to support national security and prevent criminal activity with bipartisan support. Over the years, TIP has likely contributed to the prevention and apprehension of criminals involved in human trafficking, drug trafficking, money laundering, sex trafficking, national security threats, terrorism, and other imminent threats of harm to the United States," unquote. The spokesman added, quote, "Pursuant to ARC's privacy policy, consumers may ask ARC to refrain from selling their personal data," unquote. After media coverage and scrutiny from Senator Wyden's office of the little-known data selling, ARC finally registered as a data broker in the state of California in June. Senator Wyden previously said it appeared ARC had been in violation of Californian law for not registering while selling airline customers' data for years. So we've talked about this before. This article just basically says that it's much worse than we said it was last time. And I think it's interesting that you can opt out. I wonder if that is only in jurisdictions where you have the legal right to opt out of data broker stuff, like in California. So I went to the website for these guys to check this out. It's arccorp.com. If you go to their privacy policies, there's a section in there called Your Rights and Choices, and it says you can access, amend, inquire about deletion of, notice it says inquire about, not the deleting, or update the accuracy of your personal data at any time by contacting us at privacy@arccorp.com. And then later it says, if we are processing your personal data on the basis of consent, you may withdraw that consent at any time by contacting us via the same email address. Withdrawing your consent will not affect the lawfulness of any processing that occurred before you withdrew consent, and it will not affect our processing of your personal data that is conducted in reliance on a legal basis other than consent. Nice and murky. But yeah, I'm going to email these guys for sure. And tell them I want to opt out of everything. If I get an interesting response back, I will let you know. But I would recommend you do it too. Let's flood these guys with these emails. We need to let these data brokers know that we are not okay with this. And we should be pouncing on every opportunity when investigative journalists like 404 expose these things. We should jump on at every chance to make it known that, hey, once we knew about this, we didn't want to do it. So part of the problem is we didn't know about it. All right, moving on. This is from TechCrunch. And this is another very disturbing story. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, their law enforcement arm Home Security Investigations, or HSI, has signed a contract worth $3 million with Magnet Forensics, a company that makes a phone hacking and unlocking device called Gray Key. And we've talked about that on the show before. It's kind of like Celebrate. The contract, which appeared on Tuesday in a federal government procurement database, again, transparency, said it is for software licenses for the phone hacking tech for HSI, quote, to recover digital evidence, process multiple devices, and generate forensic reports essential to the mission of protecting national security, and generate forensic reports essential to mission of protecting national security and public, unquote. Very poorly worded quote. While the contract doesn't mention the name of the product, it is likely referring to Gray Key, a forensic system to unlock smartphones and extract data from them, which was originally developed by Grayshift. Magnet Forensics merged with Grayshift following an acquisition by private equity firm Thoma Bravo in 2023. ICE has an extensive arsenal of tech tools, including facial recognition software provided by Clearview AI, cell phone spyware made by Paragon, and data analytics software made by Palantir to support its mass deportations campaign. Last year, ICE signed a contract with Magnet Forensics for Gray Key worth $5 million, as first reported by Forbes at the time. Gray Key was launched in 2016 to compete with the more established phone hacking system UFED, made by Israeli company Celebrate. So there was actually another article by Ars Technica about a recent study showing that the United States is now the leading investor in surveillance spyware as of this year. And by the way, this is despite executive orders and regulations that supposedly restrain such investments and usage of these tools in the U.S. So it's getting worse. These mercenary spyware companies are out there. These companies out there built to break into our devices and compromise all of our security and privacy. There is a huge market for this stuff. But that market is going to be really tried by a really cool update that Apple is putting in its iPhones, which I will come back to at the end of our news today. So this is my second article from 404, and it's about ChatGPT trying to guess your age or requiring ID for age verification. OpenAI has announced it is introducing new safety measures for ChatGPT after a wave of stories and lawsuits accusing ChatGPT and other chatbots of playing a role in a number of teen suicide cases. ChatGPT will now attempt to guess a user's age, and in some cases might require users to share an ID in order to verify that they are at least 18 years old. And this is a quote from OpenAI's announcement. It says, quote, We know this is a privacy compromise for adults, but believe it's a worthy trade-off, unquote. And then there's another quote from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, who posted this on X, who said, quote, "I don't expect that everyone will agree with these trade-offs, but given the conflict, it is important to explain our decision-making," unquote. In August, OpenAI was sued by the parents of Adam Rain, who died by suicide in April. The lawsuit alleges that ChatGPT helped him write the first draft of his suicide note, suggested improvements on his methods, ignored early attempts and self-harm, and urged him not to talk to adults about what he was going through. And this is an unattributed quote, but I'm guessing this is from the lawsuit. It says, "Where a trusted human may have responded with concern and encouraged him to get professional help, ChatGPT pulled Adam deeper into a dark and hopeless place by assuring him that many people who struggle with anxiety or intrusive thoughts find solace in imagining an escape hatch because it can feel like a way to regain control," unquote. In August, the Wall Street Journal also reported a story about a 56-year-old man who committed a murder-suicide after ChatGPT indulged his paranoia. Today, the Washington Post reported another story about another lawsuit alleging that a character AI chatbot contributed to a 13-year-old girl's death by suicide. OpenAI introduced parental controls to ChatGPT earlier in September, which we talked about here on the show, and has now introduced new, more strict and invasive security measures. OpenAI's post explains that it is struggling to manage an inherent problem with large language models that 404 Media has tracked for several years. ChatGPT used to be a far more restricted chatbot that would refuse to engage users on a wide variety of issues the company deemed dangerous or inappropriate. Competition from other models, especially locally hosted and so-called uncensored models, has caused OpenAI to loosen those restrictions. And this is another quote from OpenAI. It says, quote, "We want users to be able to use our tools in the way they want within very broad bounds of safety," unquote. The position it seems to have landed on, given these recent stories about teen suicide, is that it wants to, and this is kind of phrased funny, quote, "treat our adult users like adults is how we talk about this internally, extending freedom as far as possible without causing harm or undermining anyone else's freedom," unquote. Okay, so I'm very ambivalent about this. What I'm not ambivalent about is the age verification. We've talked about it many times on this show. It doesn't work. Certainly AI trying to judge my age is going to get things wrong both ways. It's going to have false positives and false negatives. Also, this may stop some of the long conversations, which is a weak spot for some of these built-in safeguards, but I don't know that this will work for shorter or anonymous sessions. You can use ChatGPT without an account, though I suppose if you do that, I would hope that it would just default to the safest version. But, what's to prevent a kid from using their parents' computer or logging in using their parents' account? There will be several ways around this. This is a cover your butt thing by OpenAI that's almost surely not going to really solve the problem. And then, I just got to point out, after just having discussed the ethics of AI with a philosophy professor last week, so is this implying that it is okay for a chatbot to help someone commit suicide if they're over 18? This is really thorny stuff, and I don't know what the solution to these things is going to be, but we haven't figured it out yet. All right, next up, this is from The Record, and it's about some concerning changes in the Swiss government about privacy. Things that are causing trouble for companies like Proton, who located there specifically for their privacy laws. Okay, the Swiss government could soon require service providers with more than 5,000 users to collect government-issued identification, retain subscriber data for 6 months, and in many cases, disable encryption. The proposal, which is not subject to parliamentary approval, has alarmed privacy and digital freedoms advocates worldwide because of how it will destroy anonymity online, including for people located outside of Switzerland. A large number of virtual private network or VPN companies and other privacy-preserving firms are headquartered in the country because it has historically had liberal digital privacy laws alongside its famously discreet banking ecosystem. Proton, which offers secure and end-to-end encrypted email along with an ultra-private VPN and cloud storage, announced on July 23rd that it is moving most of its physical infrastructure out of Switzerland due to the proposed law. Proton said the decision was prompted by the Swiss government's attempt to, quote, introduce mass surveillance, unquote. Proton founder and CEO Andy Yen told Radio Television Suisse that the suggested regulation would be illegal in the EU and the United States. Which, by the way, if you don't know, Switzerland is not in the EU. If you look at a map, they're like this little island in the middle of all the other EU countries. And apparently there's a lot of reasons for that, but we're not going to get into that here. But just FYI, they are not in the EU. And then one final jab from Andy N. He says, quote, "The only country in Europe with a roughly equivalent law is Russia," unquote. One of the Swiss officials spearheading the effort told a Swiss news outlet that strict safeguards will be used to protect against mass surveillance. The official, Jean-Louis Bieberstein, described the effort as necessary to fight cyber attacks, organized crime, and terrorism. Of course, I'm surprised they didn't trot out the Save the Children. It is unclear when the proposed regulation will be implemented. The Swiss government must give the public the right to comment during a consultation process before imposing the rule, NIM VPN Chief Operating Officer Alexis Roussel told Recorded Future News. And this is a quote from Roussel, quote, "There is a great worrying paradox. When the need for privacy tech is becoming so important to protect citizens, to have a state that actively destroys its own local privacy industry," unquote. NIM is among a coalition of industry players, politicians, and digital freedoms organizations opposing the measure. Roussel believes the government will tweak the proposal in response to the intense backlash, but he said he doesn't think the changes will be significant enough to address his concerns. The metadata the regulation would allow law enforcement to seize is, quote, "where most value for surveillance resides in who you speak to and when," unquote, according to Roussel. Internet users would no longer be able to register for a service with just an email address or anonymously, and would instead have to provide their passport, driver's license, or other official ID to subscribe, said Chloe Barthélemy, senior policy advisor at European Digital Rights, an association of civil and human rights organizations from across Europe. The regulation also includes a mass data retention obligation requiring that service providers keep users' email addresses, phone numbers, and names along with IP addresses and device port numbers for 6 months, Barthélemy said. All authorities would need to do to obtain the data, Barthélemy said, is make a simple request that would circumvent existing legal control mechanisms such as court orders. And a final quote from Barthélemy, quote, "The right to anonymity is supporting a very wide range of communities and individuals who are seeking safety online. In a world where we have increasing attacks from governments on specific minority groups, on human rights defenders, journalists, any kind of watchdogs, and anyone who holds those in power accountable, it's very crucial that we preserve our privacy online in order to do those very crucial missions," unquote. This is really concerning, and I'm sure it's expensive for Proton to have to uproot all of its hardware and move it, but I think it's a testament to their commitment to privacy that they are willing to do that because they're worried about this law. They would not be able to provide the privacy that they are claiming that they can provide if they were subject to this law. So, it's amazing to me that we are backsliding so much on privacy at the nation state level in Western and liberal democracies. It is not a good sign. All right, we do have a little bit of good news this week, a couple quick stories for you. This one's from the Hacker News, and I really had to shorten this. There was a lot of technical detail in this, and if you're interested, you should definitely read the article, but let me just give you the quick snippet here. Google on Tuesday announced that its new Google Pixel 10 phones support the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, which is shortened as C2PA. It supports the C2PA standard out of the box to verify the origin and history of digital content. To that end, support for C2PA's content credentials has been added to Pixel Camera and Google Photos apps for Android. The move, Google said, is designed to further digital media transparency. C2PA's content credentials are a tamper-evident, meaning that it's not tamper-proof. It doesn't prevent tampering. It just makes the fact that it has been tampered with obvious. C2PA is a tamper-evident, cryptographically signed digital manifest, providing verifiable provenance of digital content such as images, videos, or audio files. And I think it honestly could be used with anything, but right now it's for media. The metadata type, according to Adobe, serves as a digital nutrition label, giving information about the creator, how it was made, and if it was generated using artificial intelligence. Google said it has implemented C2PA to be secure, verifiable, and usable offline, thereby ensuring that provenance data is trustworthy, the process is not personally identifiable, and works even when the device is not connected to the internet. And finally, a quote from Google, they say, quote, "C2PA content credentials are not the sole solution for identifying the provenance of digital media. They are, however, a tangible step towards more media transparency and trust as we continue to unlock more human creativity with AI," unquote. So I mentioned this technology briefly last week when we were interviewing Christopher Lees. And again, the article actually goes into much more technical detail that I skipped over. If you are curious about the nitty-gritty stuff, definitely read the whole article. And I will just say again, this is not a silver bullet because, bad guys probably just won't use this and they will try to peddle their, deep fakes and altered images as real. But that's okay because what I care about are the trusted outlets. And Carissa talked about this. We've come to trust certain news outlets, or, we can at least choose who to trust. And if we can see in some verifiable manner that this image we're looking at or this video we're looking at came from one of those sources in a way that we can technologically guarantee, just like we do today with TLS certificates on the web, when you're going to the NewYorkTimes.com or you're going to the WashingtonPost.com, you're talking with that site. The certificate verifies this, and there's a chain of trust that helps you determine this. And this particular thing actually tracks changes as well. So you could see where the original came from and whether or not it's been altered since the original picture. And if so, by whom and how. I think it's really interesting, and I think it has some promise. So good on Google for doing this, and I hope that Apple at some point supports this as well. All right, one final article here, and this is about the hardware inside the new iPhone 17 from Apple, which was just released like a week or two ago. And this particular article is from Apple Insider. On Tuesday, Apple announced that the iPhone 17 range will ship with a new security enhancement dubbed Memory Integrity Enforcement, or MIE. The iPhone maker worked closely with ARM, that's ARM, that's the company that designs the base hardware for the kind of chips that Apple makes, to develop the feature, which prevents memory corruption issues on iPhones. In essence, MIE creates dedicated tags for specific portions of the iPhone memory. Only applications with access to these tags can utilize the device's memory, while apps that lack the necessary tags crash immediately. Apple added further safeguards like tag confidentiality enforcement to keep attackers from prying into those codes using side channel attacks or speculative execution flaws. And by the way, those side channel and speculative execution flaws, that's like Spectre and Meltdown and some of those, and Rowhammer and some of those really kind of crazy methods to poke at internal memory on a hardware chip to try to get at some of these secrets that are stored there. As TechCrunch notes, MIE will deal a serious blow to spyware that relies on memory corruption. And by the way, I don't have hard figures on this, but it's probably like 80 to 90% of spyware, particularly heavy-duty spyware from nation states that have tried to break into your phone, rely on memory corruption. So it will be significantly more difficult to break into an iPhone 17 or iPhone 17 Pro, regardless of whether hardware-based tools like Celebrite or GrayKey are used. And that is a callback to the thing we talked about earlier today. An anonymous security researcher who allegedly worked for the U.S. government said that the iPhone 17 is likely, quote, the most secure computing environment on the planet that is still connected to the internet, unquote. While MIE does not make the iPhone 17 completely immune to exploits, the researcher claims, quote, it's the closest thing we have to hack-proof, unquote. Understandably, spyware developers will have additional costs developing workarounds, and these costs might be passed on to end consumers. And in this case, the end consumers are ICE and CBP and some of these other companies that are trying to buy these products that try to crack into phones. So that's weird they call them consumers because it's not you and I they're talking about there. Jiska Klassen, a professor at the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Germany, echoed the sentiment, adding that spyware developers may not be able to offer exploits for iPhone 17 for some time. Developers of anti-malware apps and security experts have recognized the significance and potential impact of MIE with regard to spyware. And the first set of quotes is from Matthias Freilingsdorf, Vice President of Research at iVerify. And he claims that MIE is a good thing and added that it might even be a big deal. Freilingsdorf suggests that MIE may even be able to force some attackers out of the market. He believes MIE has the potential to significantly raise costs for spyware makers as well. And then a final quote from friend of the show, Patrick Wardle, who's an ex-NSA researcher and founder of the Objective-C Foundation, that's SEE, says that MIE on iPhone 17 will make the lives of spyware developers, quote, arguably infinitely more difficult, unquote. That doesn't mean bad actors will give up altogether, though. Wartles describes the never-ending battle between Apple and spyware vendors as a cat-and-mouse game, so a bypass for Apple's MIE may be discovered at some point. It's too early to say exactly when this could happen, however. Okay, this is great. So it's hyper-technical, and I would have a really hard time explaining this in a short order. But memory corruption or memory exploitation bugs are what most spyware makers and malware makers rely on, particularly when it comes to something that's generally hard to hack, like an iPhone. And Apple, with this change, Apple has basically ended that practice. But we do need to wait and see. Maybe there were some flaws in how they implemented this. But on paper, this is huge. This is a really big deal. Now, I just bought an iPhone 16 last year, an 16 Pro. And I usually try to go 3 years between updates, but man, I tell you what, this one change, this one hardware change makes me want to upgrade to a 17. I probably won't do it right away, but assuming that some security guys have a look at this and say, yep, this really is super secure, I might go ahead and upgrade and sit on that for the next 3 years. Now, I am not probably somebody who's going to be targeted by these kinds of attacks. These attacks cost a lot of money to put together, and nation states are usually behind them. And they, once they use it, if it gets out, then the researchers will get a hold of it and Apple will find out what the problem was and they'll fix it and cut them off again. So they don't just use these exploits willy-nilly. They're usually very, very targeted for very important cases. Nevertheless, I think it's just really cool, and I would love to have this protection in my phone. And I hope that Apple also is putting this in their new forthcoming M5 chips for their desktop computers. Maybe I can talk about some of the more details of this in one of my patron-only Merlin's Musings episodes where we get into some more technical stuff. We'll see. All right, so that's the news for the day. Now let's get to my tip of the week. And this is the third installment of my series on finding your old accounts so that we can clean them up, make sure they're secure, and potentially even delete them. The key word there being old, like accounts that we've forgotten we even had, or maybe forgot how to access. So as usual with my tip of the week, there is a blog article on Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons about this. So I definitely recommend you go and read the article. I'm just going to kind of give you the high-level thing here today. But we've already talked about using a password manager. If you have a password manager, then you already have a really nice list of all your online accounts. That's by nature of how they work. If you have to log into something, it's probably in your password manager. So it also doubles as a great exhaustive list of all of your online accounts. But maybe some of these accounts are so old that they predate you using a password manager to access them. So now we're going to really scrape the bottom of the barrel. And I've got some interesting and clever ideas here, and they're not all mine. I've pieced these together from various things that I've done some research on. But I'm going to give you several more methods today by which you can try to find old accounts. So first up, sign in with. Whenever you go to a website and says you could either create an account or you can just sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, a lot of people find that very attractive. They don't like keeping track of passwords. They're probably not using a password manager. So they say, sure, let me sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook. What you may not realize is when you do that, you are now creating basically data sharing agreements between those three sites, the sites where you did not create a dedicated account, and Google or Facebook or whatever provider, OAuth provider in this case, that's the technical term, OAuth. Using that single sign-on technology, you have created a path by which Google or Facebook or whatever service you use can now get data from and potentially give data to that third-party site. So setting aside that for now, you should definitely look at each of these services to find out whether or not you have set up those kind of accounts. And you may have done it without even thinking about it. It's so easy to do. You may have forgotten that you've done it. So there are links in the article that take you directly to each of these potential single sign-on or sign-in with providers that will let you find whatever, and they usually call them apps, or sites that you have linked or created these single sign-on relationships with. And that is a good way to unearth some accounts that you may have forgotten that you had. And as you find them, by the way, I would put a star by these because in the future, what we really want to do is we want to break that tie. and you want to move these off to independent accounts that are not tied and create data relationships with some of these sign-on with providers. So in the article, you can click links that'll take you to the one for Google, Facebook/Meta, Twitter/X. Amazon does this. Microsoft does this. Now, Apple does this too, and they've started doing this recently. Apple does it in a very privacy-preserving way. If you've used Sign In with Apple, you probably don't need to break that tie if you don't want to. In fact, in some cases, it might even give you some more anonymity that way because they allow you to generate email aliases instead of giving away your real email. But for the purposes of this process where we are trying to find all your online accounts, what we really want to do here is just see what's there, see what's listed there, and remind us that we may have an account that we'd forgotten about. Okay, so next up, whenever we sign up for an account, we almost always have to give them an email address, which means that when we signed up, we almost surely got some sort of a welcome email or a registration confirmation email or verify your email address email. We got some sort of communications from these accounts when we set them up in the first place. So go to your email accounts and search for emails that contain words in the subject like registration or welcome or confirm or account or activate or verify. These are common words that might come in the process of setting up a new account where you have given them your email address. Now, this also may mean, because you're looking for really old accounts, you might also have to find your really old email accounts. Did you have an AOL account, Prodigy, Hotmail, Earthlink, Yahoo, Mindspring, MSN, all those really old email accounts? Did you have one? Do you still have one? You probably do. You probably didn't close that account. So if you ever had an email address at AOL.com, Prodigy.com, or whatever it was, you should try to find those accounts as well. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem there. You're going to have to try to log in. So if you think you had one or pretty sure you had an account but haven't gotten access to it in a long time, you may have to go and try to recover that account. Tell them you forgot your password, and hopefully that'll send an email somewhere that you do still check. Or, you might have to try to get in touch with customer support somehow to recover that account. But look through all your email accounts and search through them. And when you're doing the search, you can usually preface your search in mail specifically by putting subject : and then the word you're looking for. And then it will only look in the subject line. And then be looking for emails, that came as part of setting up accounts. And then that way you'll know, oh yeah, I have an account with them. I forgot about that. All right, so now let's go for the kitchen sink. Let's just throw all sorts of other things that you might want to do. If you have a username that you've always used for years and years, and this is back in the days before email addresses when we would have things like cool girl or, amazing guy, when you're trying to find some handle that you really liked that nobody else has already taken. And if you found a couple of those that you used over the years because you like to use them, search on those in your email accounts. Maybe you'll find some other accounts by doing that. I also mentioned last week password managers, but I didn't really specifically mention things like Apple Keychain or Android passwords. You might look in those as well under your settings, like keychain access for Apple or passwords on your Android devices. See if you have anything stored in there that you'd forgotten about. If you think you may have had an account somewhere, but you're not sure and you can't find any emails about it, you can always try going to that website and just try logging in. If you're the kind of person like a lot of us who had a favorite password they always used to use for everything, try using that password. If you still can't get in, try forgot my password and see if you can recover that way. Also, the apps that we install on our smartphones for sure, and in some cases on our computers, a lot of those apps force you to create an account, which means you have an online account. Even if you've only ever used the app, you still do have an associated online account. And we're trying to enumerate all of our accounts. So look back through the apps that you have purchased, even not just the ones you have installed. Go to your app, your Apple App Store or your Google Play Store, your Microsoft App Store. Look through your purchase history and look at the apps you've purchased and think, did those have a login? Did I have to create an account to use those? And add those to your list. All right, next up, there are other services that you can tie accounts to. For instance, a lot of cloud storage accounts allow you to tie into other apps to automatically save documents from there, for example. So Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, iCloud, Box.com, some of the cloud storage ones, gaming ones as well often have tie-ins with other accounts. So, Discord, Steam, Twitch, those kind of things. Sometimes payment services will have you linked to other accounts. Sometimes fitness apps will let you tie to other accounts, Peloton, Garmin, Fitbit, Strava. And then for business, sometimes we have things too, Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, LinkedIn, TripIt, airlines, hotels, those kind of things. Sometimes they will ask you to tie into other accounts for data sharing or making things convenient for you or whatever. Kind of like we did with the sign in with, if you go to those accounts and log in, usually somewhere in your profile or settings, there might be a linked account or shared access or grant permissions maybe, and that might give you some other ideas for apps you may have forgotten about. If you have any old devices, and I mean like Palm Pilots, Blackberries, old tablets or phones or old computers that you still have access to, and if you can still power them up, there may be clues in there as well as to some old accounts you may have. And then finally, and I think this is really interesting, Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned site is a site where you can go and enter an email address. And Troy has gone to great lengths to gather a lot of information about data breaches, everyone he can get his hands on basically. And most of those data breaches are indexed by email addresses. And so he has a service that allows you to enter an email address and he will search through all of the data breaches that his tool is aware of and list all the accounts that pop up with that email address. And that is definitely a place where you might have forgotten you had one. And by the way, in this case, if you find something that is in there and you know that the password on that account has not changed and it's not strong, you might want to go change the passwords on those accounts. But by the way, we're going to be kind of evaluating that in our next step anyway. So you don't have to do it right now if you don't want to, especially if the breach was really old. But that could be another really interesting way to find out about accounts that you don't remember you even had. All right, there you go. That's a pretty comprehensive list of ways for you to dig up and make an exhaustive list of all of your old online accounts. Pace yourself here, folks. That is a lot of stuff. You don't have to do this right away, and you don't have to wait to get your exhaustive list before you start taking some of these next steps. But I wanted to give you a really comprehensive set of ideas to perform forensic analysis on yourself, basically, to try to find all of your old accounts. All right, that's your news, and that is your tip of the week. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. That is your news this week, and yet another tip of the week and part of my series on finding your old accounts. We're already running a little long today, so I will keep this short. I do want to say I'm going to be traveling yet again, and it happens to be falling again on a news show week. And so this time I've decided to do something a little different, and that is to skip the news week. And so what I'm going to do instead, it's also so I could take a little time off. And because I am so flush with interviews right now, I'm actually going to do 3 interview shows in a row. So instead of interview, it's going to be 3 straight interviews. Now, if anything major happens in the news, I will certainly cover that in the next news show, which will be several weeks out at this point. If it's something urgent that I want to tell you about, I will post it on my social media accounts as usual. So that's a reason you might want to follow me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Mastodon. You can find all that information under contacts on firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. But I want to try this out and see how this goes, because I want a mechanism by which I can take a little time off during the year. And skipping a news show will actually let me pre-record a bunch of stuff and pre-schedule it, so I could take a little time off. And because I have a little vacation coming up here soon, now would be a great time to try that out. So we're going to give this a try and see how that goes. Next week, we're going to be talking to Vishnu from Intay. He's the CEO and founder, and we're going to talk about what it's like to make privacy-centered apps. Then we're going to talk with Paul Roberts from the SRFF about secure and resilient software. And then after that, the third interview in our series of 3 in a row will be with Jake Braun, who has worked in the White House and has worked on cybersecurity and is now one of the co-founders of the DEF CON Franklin project, which sort of like Josh Corman's I Am the Cavalry and Undisruptible 27 is dedicated to improving the security and resiliency of our critical infrastructure here in the United States. It's a really interesting and important discussion. And in fact, I'll be doing yet another interview, in this case, a panel interview with several other folks doing similar work around protecting critical infrastructure coming up later this year. So those are the next 3 interviews. You're going to get them back to back to back. And then we'll be back again in October with our next news show. I got a lot of great stuff coming down the pike. I have locked in an interview with 3 wonderful people from Consumer Reports. We're going to work together to put together the best and worst gift guide for 2025. Stay tuned for that. That is going to be a lot of fun. And I have several more in the works. I'm booking out into February at this point. So I've got lots and lots of great interviews coming down the pike. So subscribe and then you won't miss those. I rarely mention it, but I should do it more. If you want to wear some clothes with my really super cool Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons logo on them, I do sell merch. You can go to fdsd.me/merch to see them all, and there's tons of stuff. If you want to support the show directly, you can become a patron and then get access to all sorts of cool perks, including some great private patron-only podcasts. Go to fdsd.me/patron for more information on that. And of course, there's always the book and the blog and the newsletter and other stuff too. You can get to all that stuff by going to firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. All right, that's it for this week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe out there. And until next time, as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge down.